Welcome to Power Boat Talk, the podcast where we talk everything performance boats with your host, Joe Road.
Well, hello and welcome to Power Boat Talk. Today I have just a, when you guys are done listening to this, I mean, this is just a superstar of the hot rod boat industry. Most of you guys have probably never heard of him because he's kind of a behind the scenes guy. He's actually an aerospace engineer by trade, started out as a boater, became an engineer, and went back to boating, kind of applied what he learned both ways to each career, and he's just a really interesting guy. So he's going to have some great stories. I'm sure we're going to learn some stuff about bottom design and all kinds of performance boat tricks. So today my guest is Jeff Bennett. So Jeff, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for taking the time to interview non-drivers. I appreciate drivers. They're great and they're important, but there's so many guys behind the scenes, and motor guys and hardware guys and boat builders and just jet drive guys. And just amazing group of a cast of characters behind the scenes that you don't often know, but they make a big difference in this sport. Huge. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, cool. Well, like we talked before, hopefully I'll be doing this for a long time, so we'll get to those guys. Yeah. So I always kind of like to start with what you're doing now. I mean, you're a consultant. You do a lot of stuff with a lot of the top drag race teams now, and your forte is bottom design.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I follow you on Instagram. What I really like that you do is every weekend after a race weekend, you're congratulating guys. Hey, this guy, these five guys have my bottoms. This guy did this. This guy did that. So maybe tell us right now, like what's the current successes you've had. And
what's been very busy this summer has been ProJet, which is a 660 foot class in SDBA, and these guys are running, if you don't have 2,500 horsepower in an open boat, you're not competitive. So the two big guys that I spend time with are Robert Ledbetter and Jeremy. Now Dawson Dickerson, his son, is driving the boat, but those guys have run, Robert just set the record at 349. So that's in a 660, 349. A top alcohol hydro runs about 318. So it's not that far behind a top alcohol hydro. And they have to slow down because there's a speed limit of 145 miles an hour. And both those guys can run well over 145 miles an hour in a half track. So that's one of the biggest games, when you get off the throttle. So what happens with those guys is with Jeremy, he sent, and this happens a lot with the guys in the SDBA, they send me data. I look at the data. Sometimes I get a video, sometimes I don't. And they talk to me. The driver input's super important. That's really, really important. I say, here's what's going on. Here's the changes I would recommend making. And then they go out for next round. We go through the whole weekend like that. With Robert Ledbetter, he has David Ebert, was one of the top motor guys. And Dave and I have worked together many times. And he calls me, and we go through all this stuff. And he really challenges me. He's a very smart guy. He doesn't just accept what I say. He challenges everything. And I like that because he's a great racer and a lot of experience in a lot of different kind of racing. He does Bonneville and drag cars and boats and all kinds of stuff. So that's pretty much the way it works for SDBA. And NJBA, when I'm out here, I don't go to that many SDBA races, once in a while. Out here at NJBA, I can see the boat run. I can look at the data, and that's any number of guys. Guys I spent a lot of time with, Shell Adams, who's the Pro Gas Jet record holder. I spent a lot of time with Tim Ortiz, he's racing flat bottoms now, but he's the record holder in unblown fuel. I don't spend that much time with, but I'm involved with Brian Nelson, who's the Top Fuel Jet record holder. He has one of my wings. So any kind, like last year at Chandler, they got some real severe handling problems. So Dan and I were talking every single round to get it down the track, and finally came up with a plan and got it down the track. And see, Jake Yeager and all that. I'm trying to remember. I wrote all these notes just because you forget things when you're 68 years old. Yeah, those are the main guys. Those are the four guys that are current record holders right now. And there's just so many guys I've worked with over the years. But that's kind of the general way I work. Usually it starts with a bottom job. When I say a bottom job, that's really important. There's a big difference between a hull bottom blueprint, and a keel modification. A hull blueprint is intended to make the boat the way the manufacturer originally designed it. And molds shift. They can't make things as sharp in the mold as you'd like. So you true things up, you sharpen things up. Real common in V-bottoms. In a tunnel, the big challenge is to keep the boat connected to the water. So you've got, one thing that's weird about jet boats is all drag boats, the game is to get the boat out of the water. But in a jet boat, you have to connect with the water to get water in the pump. So in the old days, it was just loader, shoe. But one thing that I worked on and I believed in, and it turned out to be right, is the keel is a big driver. Keel is probably 50% of what happens going in. So the keel design becomes really important. So anyway, the keel modification doesn't help the boat at all, but it makes the jet drive work well. So it's a completely different kind of job, totally different deal. And I like the keel modification. Being in aerospace, my specialty is aerodynamics, so there was a lot of design and inlet design when I worked on the Tomahawk cruise missile and a lot of black programs, which are classified programs that I can't talk about, but their inlet design is a big deal in anything that has an engine in it. So air scoop design in boats and in the bottom, the keel, that is an ongoing challenge. And a few years ago, I thought, I'm kind of done. I think I've figured out for every weight and horsepower, I think I got a handle on it. But with the new Pro Jet class, we got problems. And even the two guys that I mentioned, they trade the record back and forth. They are the fastest jet boats in the United States. Well, Brian's faster, but he's got a capsule boat. It's a little bit different category. In open boats, there's nothing that can run with these guys. But those boats aren't real happy about after 200 feet. So guess who has to fix it? Me.
Is this because of the horsepower levels these days?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've kind of concluded that when you get over 2,100, somewhere in there, I don't have an exact number, somewhere around 2,100 horsepower and greater, a new problem arises. And so that is yet to be fixed. So,
because how far back? It probably wasn't that far back when that same boat we're talking about, the top boats, they were 1,000 horsepower, right? 1,200 horsepower, right?
I think I'm good to 1,800, 2,000 horsepower. Tim Ortiz was making about 2,000 horsepower, I think, and we were fine. That worked fine. But over that, not so much. So when I started this years ago, first one I did it was Norm Grimes' boat, and he set a record on the first pass. I go, done. That's it.
No, you set the stage. What made a name for you was the Eliminator stuff. We're talking about Daytonas, right?
Yeah. But before that, I grew up in Fullerton, California, went to Troy High School. One of my good friends, Craig Millett, his parents gave him a Rogers 18-footer with a big block Chevy in it. So we were going skiing all the time. And go to the river, have a good time. We just we're young guys doing crazy, stupid stuff all the time. But one day, a guy came up and challenged. Craig got in the boat. He wanted to do a single driver. He challenged him to a race, and we tied this guy. And we didn't know this guy. He had the same boat, same exact boat. And it turned out to be Bob Barron Jr., who was inducted into the Drag Boat Racing Hall of Fame, I think this last year. And he invited Craig and us to join him in DBA racing at Bakersfield, and because we tied. And he said, no one's ever gotten that close to me. I win every race. So we went out and we didn't do anything. We had such a good time. We loved it.
Yeah.
And we got into...
but now, had you modified Craig's boat at all, or...
I'd straightened things up a little bit, but what happened was we were high school kids. We didn't know anything, and Craig was really into the motor, and I was really into the bottom. So I started working on that, and it was pretty basic stuff. I mean, it wasn't fancy stuff at all. It was real crude stuff. In fact, I took a class in how to do fiberglass work, and I learned a lot about that. But
now this was before you were into engineering, right?
Yes.
So then what made you, most guys never think about the bottom, especially those years. What took you in that path?
Well, I'll tell you what, when we first started racing the Rogers, and I want to tell a story about how I got into engineering because I came from racing. we ended up going to Hondo. Hondo wanted Craig really badly, and so did Sanger. But Hondo had a boat we both liked, and so they had a flat keel in it, and they had already discovered the flat keel was a loser. So they said, and they even gave us the material to do it. And so I glassed on the keel, and it worked fine. And we did very well. We set a 5-mile course record with it. It was a great boat. I loved the time with Hondo. They were just a great team.
This was circle boats at the time, right?
Well, they were a drag race team, and they primarily, and they were just dominating drag rows, flat bottoms, and even hydros. Mm-hmm. They were kind of new to jets. They were kind of a new deal, but it was fun. So later on, I think it was 77, Bob Leach came out with the Daytona, the tunnel, and wow, we looked at that and go, this is the greatest thing ever. This is very cool. And so Craig got it, and we put cavitation plates on it to keep the nose down through the corner. It turned fine. We actually won a lot of races with it as a circle boat. And the keel was pretty much what I'd done on the Hondo, which is kind of Hondo's direction. It worked really, really well. And so simultaneous to this, the drag crowd, which was Greg, was doing really well in his underdog boat. I think he did 111 or so. And Norm, too, has done some big numbers. The problem they were having is the boats were inconsistent. They'd run 110, and they'd run 93. And you can't win races like that. You can set records, you can qualify number one, but you can't win the race. So, kind of fast forward, I ended up working at Liberty Boats, and we were a circle race team and ended up doing a Keeler record up there and a 5-mile course record. But we wanted to get in drag racing, and I wanted to design a new tunnel. And I did. The tunnel didn't work out that great. I learned a lot from it, but during the process of developing that, I needed information. And I knew Norm because he was a circle racer before a drag racer. And I said, Norm, I see you having a problem. I put this round keel on the Daytona. It works fine in circles. Why don't I do that on your drag boat? And he said, fine. We met at Eliminator in Anaheim, and I met Bob Leach for the first time. And he said, why not? What the hell? What do you got to lose? The boat's not working right. So I put a very small keel. It was no big deal. I can't believe it actually worked. But went to Parker, and he makes a lap. The boat looks good, but I realized, and Craig Millett was with me. I said, I realized I've never seen Norm run. I don't know if that was a good pass or not. And then they announced that's a leg on the record for unblown jet. And I go, great, done. End of story. And so that was really the beginning of drag race keel designs. And then I met Greg. I didn't know Greg, and he said, would you do that to mine? Great. I joined the team. I was part of the team where it was Norm and Greg and I think that, to me, was the best jet team ever. We really developed a lot of stuff that's standard today. I'm really proud of being on that team and we fought like dogs in the pits. I mean, we argued with everything, but it was always a technical discussion. And by the time we were done, we came up with an answer, and that's what we did. And so many things came out of that. Keel was one of them. Front wings was one of them too. But at the time, thinking that's it, we go from Parker, which the boat ran fantastic. The next race was Bakersfield, and it wasn't that good. And then Norm went to Chandler, Firebird Lake, and it didn't work at all. We couldn't get it past 90 miles an hour. And so it came back to me, what's the problem? And I realized that on that very smooth water, it generates so much lift, we have to kill lift. So I changed the center, not the keel, but the center sponson a little bit to kill lift. And that worked great. And from that point on, we had a plan. And it just, I had to adjust for every change. So we went from 500-pound boats to 400-pound boats. It was a big change. And the keel had to change. And then when we went from steel motors to aluminum motors, that was another big change. So there was all these changes that it just went on for years and years of this stuff. And as I mentioned, that the pro jet guys are still struggling with this much power. I thought a few years ago, I'm done. I could just reproduce these for. No, I'm not done. Once again, and that's what makes it interesting. And I think that's why guys like me get engineering into it, because it's a never-ending quest for knowledge. You're always pushing the envelope, and you never know where you're going to go. You know, I didn't know this problem was going to happen a couple of years ago. I had no idea this was going to be a problem, but it is. And so, you know, you move on. So anyway, that's kind of the overview, 40,000 foot view of keel design and how I got there. But so much is the inlet, the actual part that goes into the intake. But the keel, there's so many parts to it that it's gotten so precise, and I've had to be more precise over the years. And you know, initially I could do a keel in a weekend, no problem. Now it takes me 5 or 6 days to do a keel, because they're
no way,
much more involved. They're much more detailed, and it's not a one size fits all for different horsepower, different classes. You just give it your best shot, but they're different. Yeah, there's not. I don't do one keel. There's quite a few different keels. So that's kind of how the keels develop and are continuing to develop. We'll see what happens in the future, but right now we've got a problem with that. And I think I haven't gotten under the boat, but I think Brian Nelson's having problems too. Just talking to Dan. I'm not really involved in the hardware there, but they're struggling on top end. The boat was great early, but it's not great late. And that's kind of the thing about jet boats. To get it all the way down the track, you have to do a lot of things really well.
Mm-hmm.
Not just horsepower, not just weight. So that's kind of how I got here with keel modifications.
Gotcha. Wow, crazy. So how did you mention wings a couple times?
Well, the wing deal came about with as we got the keels working really well. The boat, we used to run the boats really high, a lot of attitude, and we were blowing boats over and crashing, and it was really bad. And so the keel was great, and it was bad because it would never unhook as it was getting down to take off. And so there was, I remember the exact situation that happened, but finally Norm was the crew chief on the Dash for Cash team, with Greg driving the blown gas boat and Norm driving the unblown boat. It wasn't a case where Norm said, you know, it would be a good idea if you came up with an idea. It was like, listen, buddy, this is your problem. You fix it. I want an answer in 1 week. I want at least 5 different solutions. Yes, sir. I did it. Oh, yes, sir. I will do as told. And I did. So I came back with a bunch of different solutions, and one of them was a front wing. And so he goes, I like this because if it doesn't work, we can take it off. The other ones involved major tooling changes to the Daytona. It was a big deal. So actually, I still preferred some of the other ones to this day. But, okay. So the test was, there was a boat called Double Vision owned by Bill and Kirk Jordan. And they had a Root Ford, really interesting motor, a Hemi Ford, really neat motor, blown gas. And at the time, I think the record was 132 or something like that. And so we went to, it was an IHBA race in Firebird, and they had a test and tune day, Friday. So we went there Friday, put the wing on, guessed at an angle. Randy Mueller drove it, 138 miles an hour, perfect pass, great, super. So the team was kind of divided. You had some of the team that said, this wing is stupid. Get rid of this thing. We got to dump it. So we took the wing off. And it went 200 feet on the next pass, out of control. Driver came back. I can't drive this boat. It's undrivable. So we put the wing back on, 138. Perfect. And then the other side of the team was arguing. They said, wait a minute, the water was perfect, this and that. And we started taking the wing off, and Bill and Kirk Jordan, the owners, said, that wing is never coming off this boat. I don't care what you guys like. Shut up. It's on. So the next day, we set the record at 138, won the race, and that was the beginning of wings. And so the wing evolved over the years, and I finally ended up manufacturing wing because I didn't like the products that were being sold. And one of the things we learned, and why the new wing came about, was we were running at, it was Mike DeClark running an unblown fuel boat called F-Bomb, the first one was an orange boat, and he was going to we were running well, but the boat was kind of ill handling on the top end. And Mike said, hey, Jeff, can we put more wing in it? I think a wing will help it. And I said, I don't think so, because I think we're getting on the verge of stalling the wing. When you put too much attitude, it just stalls the wing, and it doesn't work at all. So I said, look, I'll measure it. And sure enough, we had a little bit more room to go. So I pulled the wing up one hole, which is about 3 degrees. And that's on the order of 25, 30 pounds of more downforce. And the boat ran perfectly down the track. And he won the race. And so as everybody's putting things together, I'm reviewing the data in the race trailer, and I saw something I have never seen before in my life. And it was that while the speech is jet boats don't have any top end, they're done by half track, was false. It turns out, as long as you keep that keel connected down the track, speed keeps going up. So I asked Mike, I said, what I'm seeing here tells me the boat was accelerating at the finish line. And he said, it was accelerating past the finish line. I didn't lift for a while. It was flying. It was great. So that was the moment in a big movie where the music swells up and everybody's cheering, a big heroic moment. No one cared. I said, guys, you got to see this. This is incredible. And they all looked like, shut up. We're drinking beer. We've got the trophy. Shut up. Just be quiet. And I just knew right then that was going to change jet boat racing. And it did. It absolutely did. From that point on, we realized that the wing, although intended to help the driver respond from the boat being so flighty and give him more time to respond to it, the real purpose of the wing is to keep that keel connected. And when you keep that keel connected all the way down the track, magic. That's why these guys can run so fast. And even the two boats I mentioned, ProJet, it's not really working. The keel's not really working, but it's still connected. It's still connected. So we're still getting a partial load. So that was one of the biggest discoveries of anything I've been involved with. It was dramatic, and it just changed the sport. It was so amazing. It's too bad there wasn't a band there or something, because it was great. It was a great moment. Great moment in my life. It really was.
Now, you said when you looked at the data, you looked at computer data, correct?
Yeah.
So obviously before that existed, you didn't really, it was seat of your pants. What the mile per hour told you.
We had computers, and we had keel pressure. That's the one that came out of the David Kirkland Ken Zeal top fuel jet. And I looked at it, but I didn't really get it until that passed. And I realized that as the speed was continuing up, and we were recording, I don't know if it was GPS speed or I think we had a speedo. We could actually pick up the water. It was the first time I connected the dots between keel pressure, which is a vacuum basically, and speed. That was I'd seen keel pressure. I didn't realize what it meant when it was coming off the keel. It meant it was running out of water. And so that was, in my view, one of the biggest moments in the last, 10 years or so in jet boat racing. It really changed everything. And so many of these guys run wings for that reason. That's why they do it.
Now, how did you ever decide, at some point, wait, keel pressure, we need to measure this? It's a thing.
Well, going back to the Ken Zeal boat, the top fuel jet, I really didn't know. I said, it'd be interesting to see what happens. And all the 15 pressures I put on the suction piece, you don't really need it. It turns out that what everybody runs today came off of that team: keel pressure and upper and lower suction pressure, which is about an inch in front of the impeller, high and low. And those three gauges you need before the impeller are really, in my view, at least at this point, all you need.
In the intake piece, the suction piece.
Yeah. Right.
Gotcha.
So on the Ken Zeal boat, I expected to work on before the impeller and then work on after the impeller. But over the years, I've never worked on the backside.
Really?
Jack McClure does excellent work in the impeller, excellent work on bowls. That's his thing. But I've spent all these decades working on the front end. The back end is horsepower and pump design. The front end is getting the water in the pump. And that's what I do. My deal is get the water in the pump. That's my whole job, really.
And did I miss? So you say you get the high and the low, and is there a third one you say where you pick up the keel pressure?
Keel pressure, yeah. So you have keel pressure right in front of the loader. That's where I put it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it's just a hole there, and it picks up a pressure, and that reads vacuum. And then the high and low are also the relationship between the two. I won't get into that because there's some boat classified information on that, but those two pressures are really, really important to know. And it also, sometimes people give me a number, and I say, well, I get 53 pounds of pressure. Well, first question is, where is the pressure tap? The farther forward the pressure tap is, the lower the pressure is going to be, and the farther up the pressure tap is, the higher pressure is. And I know I had this discussion with Brian Nelson when we first went and put on the wing, and he said his numbers were really low. And after talking to him, I realized where they're picking up the pressure is going to be way lower than where my guys are picking up the pressure, so I can't really compare apples to apples comparison. So
Gotcha.
most of the guys are about the same spot now. I think that's kind of the accepted place. Maybe somebody has something different, but I think most people, impeller 1 inch forward, as high as you can get it, as low as you can get it on the upper and lower pressures is pretty much the normal thing guys are doing today.
Mm-hmm. For the most part, what you're really doing is looking at that boat and how much it increases or based on that boat. Like you said,
Yeah.
you're not comparing, well, this guy's got 50, this guy's got 48, something's different.
I really
Gotcha.
don't, and that's it's tough to compare if you have identical pressure locations. Then, of course, then you get into weight of boat, horsepower.
Sure.
There are different factors you have to take into consideration, but yeah, that's kind of it.
Yep.
Those.
Now, is this something a guy that's got a 70, 80, 90 mile an hour jet boat, can this be of use to him in any kind of tuning with shoes or loaders?
It can, but it's not a cheap option. To me, the one to get is race pack, and I think that a decent race pack now is $5,000. So that's not really practical for everybody, but some guys have got the resources and they get it. The race pack is a great unit. It's really reliable, been around a long time. They work, and their software is the best of anything I've used. That's probably the thing RacePack does better than anybody is they listen to drag racers. And over the years, especially when I was working on Norm's boats, the cars, the top alcohol dragsters, the RacePack guys would be in there all the time. I say, hey, could you do this? And they go, yes, we can do that. We can do that. They turned me down on one. I wanted to select a color per run for every thing I clicked on. They said, no, we're not doing that. Forget it. Shut up. We don't need your input. But they listened to racers and they got good feedback what racers really need. And they listened to all those guys, Forrest and all those top racers, the pro stock guys. They you got guys that know how to win and they know what they want to look at and they get it. And RacePack delivers that. It's a great unit. But if you don't have the money for RacePack, there's things we used to do before there were RacePack computers. And that is, to me, the most important piece to get right is the shoe. And shoe is really, really critical. And on the top boats, they're 30,000s or 15,000s changes are not uncommon. They don't make 100,000s changes. They don't make anything that big. Tiny, tiny changes. But when you don't have enough shoe, and kind of my philosophy is you keep throwing shoe at it, more and more shoe, until it says stop. Now, when you have an onboard computer, I can tell we're getting close. I know I can look at it and say we're getting close here. In the old days, we'd go too far. In fact, I think the Dash for Cash team was the first one in history to actually blow the tail. That is a phenomenon where the water backs up and the tail jumps out of the water. And at the time, we were going, what the heck is nobody? And we even had people. I remember Bill Scotton, who now builds tunnel jets. He told us the reason why that's happening and why tunnel jets will never work is because they pack too much air and it forces the tail out of the water. Well, Greg's boat had a problem, Norm's boat didn't. So we knew that wasn't true, and we figured out it was too much water. It just backed up. It's kind of like if you're guzzling a lot of liquid of any kind, at some point, you can't take anymore and it just comes out. And that's what happens with a jet boat. And so you go from pulling the tail down to lifting the tail, and that's what happens. So we prevent that by making smaller changes. So you get into a 30,000 change. It'll get unhappy, but it won't do that. It won't buck the driver out of the seat or anything like that. So starting from a point, at least my opinion is, the shoe is the most important thing to get. You keep throwing shoe at it, and probably, in most guys, probably 60 thousandths at a time, and you feel like, how touchy is the shutdown? That's what we used to get to, because we didn't have anything else. How close are you if, for instance, you throw the rods out of it? How are you going to crash? And so if you felt like, this motor coughs, I'm going to get wet, then we back off the shoe a little bit. But the other side of it is cavitation, and this is really more common, is the boat doesn't accelerate anymore. It gets to a point, it just kind of, it just falls on its face. And two things, well, actually three things. One thing, if it's really off, the RPM will continue to climb. So that's one of the first things I look when bring the data up after a run, is the RPM flat? It should be. A jet boat should be flat line. If it's running out of water, that's the most extreme case. Another less extreme case is the boat will start to wander. It'll just go left and right and left. It won't track well. And in that case, if you take your foot just pull 200 RPM off the throttle, off the motor, it'll speed up. And so many guys would come in and say, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but I backed off and it got faster. That means it's running out of water. So those are really big signs on cavitation, and that means you need more water. You need more shoe. So you keep throwing water in. So I like, when I start with a boat, I like to start on the shallow side and build up until we see. And of course, all the stuff I'm working on is data, so I can see when we're getting close. We get to a point where we're done. But that already has it. And I'm working with a guy out of Wisconsin, great young racer, Jason Afandre in Wisconsin. He's a fantastically good racer, but he doesn't have an onboard computer, although he has gauges he can look at. And that's the kind of discussion we get into. What happens if? Because he doesn't have the ability to send me data and all that. But that guy's going to be a big star. If he wants to continue in the sport, he's going to be a big star. He's really good. Really good racer.
So then you probably answered a question, because guys ask me all the time. I talk to a lot of new jet boaters, and it's like, hey, everybody wants to put a droop, a ride plate, and a shoe, and most guys don't know what that entails. Right. It's a pretty big project, right?
It's a big project, yeah.
So guys are always asking, is it really worth it? But it sounds to me, if a guy wants to go 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, then he probably needs to go there.
Yeah, I think so. And usually, if you do that, most boats come with the intake pretty far forward, and the race guys are at where the back of the shoe is at the transom, sometimes further back than that. With the Cheyenne, you have to move it a little further back so the pop-off clears the tail they have on there. But the standard intake location for the old days was maybe 4 inches forward of that, and it's structurally really good, but it flow-wise is not so good. So if you do that, now you've got to take the intake out, mill the back end for a shoe, have shoes made, move the intake back, which entails filling that hole. You got to reglass it, or some guys do an aluminum thing and fill it in with epoxy. It's a big task. So if you're making 500 or 600 horsepower, I don't think it's worth it. If you have a really super heavy boat, a 900-pound boat, I'm not convinced it's worth it. But if you're making, and I get calls for guys, well, I'm making 1,000 horsepower, and those kind of deals, yes. And it's not just a speed deal and a tuning thing, but it's also more stable. The boats are really stable. And that, when we went to the shoe and ride plate in circle boats, gosh, the stability just improved dramatically. It was really good. So, but it's a difficult do-it-yourself unless you really know what you're doing. I would go to a reputable guy, say who does that stuff. And I think of a couple off the top of my head: MPD and Big Lead Racing, Trevor Griseni. Those two guys I know personally, and they know, they get it, they know exactly what's involved, and they'll give you pretty good advice on, in fact, excellent advice on whether it's worth it or not for your application. But that's where I would go.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. That's good information. I think there's a lot of guys that have never heard that before. So yeah, coming from you, that's good. Good.
Yeah, it's fun to have seen it all, starting from all the stuff we used to run and where we are now. It's in fact, getting ready for this interview, it's really remarkable. As I'm going through all this stuff, I forgot that happened and how it happened, and all these there's just a million stories on how you got here, how we did it, and so many guys have no clue. Well, this is the way they run them. Why? Well, there's a reason why. All those things happen, and the shoe stuff, and big hero of mine is, and I've got them. I've listed them here. I'll just start with one, since you wanted to talk in. Was Lee Talbot. I know Greg in his interview talked about Lee Talbot.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about him, and I don't know much about him.
Yeah, he was a guy that if there's anybody I would like to be like in boat racing, it's him. He would be the number one guy. He was super smart, super innovative, but a lot of the stuff, the shoe, ride plate, loader stuff, even some of the keel stuff. He worked with the Barons for the years for the drag boat, Bob Barron Jr. and Brent Barron, who drove the circle boat, and Don. Not Don. I don't know if he did Don Dameron's boat.
Don Dameron, yeah, he's another name. Yeah.
He was great. Yeah, I was glad to see him and Bob Barron Jr. get inducted in the Drag Boat Racing Hall of Fame, because they really, when I first went to a race, those were the guys that are like, wow, those guys are awesome. Yeah. I love those guys. But Lee Talbot, he did anything. He wasn't afraid to do anything, and I so admired that. He had one on one of the Barron's top fuel boat, where he put the pump outside of the boat completely. He had an aluminum plate that the leading edge of the pump was at the transom, and he could adjust the entire. It was amazing, and I love them. But unfortunately, awesome. He's kind of gotten lost, and very few people even know who he is, and he's a legend to me. He's just phenomenal.
Is he still with us? Do you know?
No, I think he passed away a few years ago. One of the Donnie LeBon's guy, crew chief there, he knew Lee and he knew me, and he said, and it was the biggest compliment I ever received in racing. He said, "You guys are like twins. You guys operate the same way," and that meant a lot to me. So, because Lee was great, he was a star, big star.
It's a pretty big pat on your back that you're still really, really relevant now. Like you've really evolved, and that's. A lot of guys, most guys don't do that. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I hope so. But I think that for me, it's a constant search for the truth, the next thing. And just like I talked about with Jeremy Dickerson and Robert Ledbetter, they are record holders. Those two boats are the fastest open jet boats in the country. They can beat any flat bottom on the planet right now. Mm-hmm. No problem. And they can run pretty close to the top alcohol hydros right now. They're not very far behind. And those guys still struggle. And so when I think, okay, I'm done, and probably 10 times in the last 50 years, that's it. The keels are done. They're done. And so, wait a minute. One more thing. And I just always want to get the max out, and we're always pushing for the next thing. How far can we push this thing? What are the weak areas? I do this a lot with Shell Adams. He's the team I deal with the most. He's the Pro Gas Jet champion and great driver. As a matter of fact, for me, he's the best driver of all time, and I'll tell you why.
Really?
Most people look at Greg Schumacher, who's a great driver, especially in the old system. Kyle Walker, Tony Scarlatta, Kevin Kinsley. I know all these guys. And but what I need is not necessarily, although Shell does a good job in reaction times, what he's exceptional at is giving me information. When he comes in, he can tell me exactly what happened. If he saw water condition problems, the boat did this, it didn't do this, whatever. That is more important than the onboard data that we get. It's the most important thing. If you have a driver that can reflect on what, and he does that better than anybody I've ever worked with, and it's so valuable. And it's shocking to me when I hear crew chiefs tell their driver, just shut up and drive the boat. I'll make it work. I go, what? That's like you're throwing gold away. That data is so important. So anyway, that's my commentary on getting data, and it's all good. Yeah. It's all good.
Well, and one comment I want to make, you said you're just always out. You're just trying to find the truth. You're just trying to identify and deal with the truth. And the reality is that through 50 years of doing this, that truth changes. It's changed a lot. And I
It
mean,
changes.
you're talking about right now, they're the fastest guys, and that truth is changing again because of horsepower, hull design, whatever. And
It is.
so
Yeah.
good for you. I mean, you've evolved, and you realize that. You know, you're not sitting there digging your feet in the sand, going, "This is not how it works. It's not how it works. You got to do it this way." You know.
Yeah, I really, that's what I enjoy. And that's why I enjoy pro racing more than bracket racing. Bracket racing, you don't have to really run that well. If you can hit the number, that's okay. In pro racing, it's faster and quicker. And it never ends. You're always finding the new thing. And it's fun when I talk to like Dan Nelson. We talk a lot, and well, how about this? How about that? And all this stuff. He's the record. It's the fastest jet boat in the world. And he's going, yeah, but we could do this. And guys like us are knuckleheads. We're nerds.
Yeah.
We're the guys that no one wants to talk to. We're in the back of the picture. They go, who's that guy back there? I have no idea. That's me. That's who I am.
Yeah.
But guys like us love that. We love finding it. It's almost not even about winning anymore. It's about when you get the boat to work the way you want it to work, or it does what you predict it to do. That is the ultimate deal. It's a great feeling.
And it's got to be. I mean, I don't know. I think us gearheads, and we kind of have a halfway idea of what you're dealing with as far as, like, we talk about drag race guys and the clutches and the tires and computers and all this stuff, but it's amazing. Even like F1, like, you've got these teams of just tons of people, and they're all using the same stuff, and they can collect the same data, but they're hundreds of a second apart, and you can't catch that guy. Or you'll see a top fuel team just get on a run where all of a sudden they'll win 6 races, and it's like, because all these stupid little things you guys are trying to make work together, they figured it out.
They found something. That's right.
And then there's the other 2 or 3 guys. They're lost, right? Because they haven't won anything for a year, and they won everything last year because they got lost. But it's got to be. I can see somebody with an analytical mind like yours. Like, it's a chess game, and you just finally get the pieces put together, and it's got to feel, when you do, which is probably rare, because
it really is
like
rare.
You say.
And you talk about the guys that are lost. Everybody's lost. I'm lost. There are times when I go, I have no idea what's happening here. And you think about, in fact, that was one thing I did want to talk about, is when we were racing together, me, Norm, and Greg, and also Marcy Carbajal, we would drive home from the races. We'd drive to the races too, but I mean, we drive home in the crew cab. Those discussions, we figured out more stuff by talking through it and say, well, that can't be true because this is, and years later, Greg and I were talking. I said, God, I wish we'd recorded those things. We could have sold those things, because that was gold. That information was absolute gold. What we talked about was amazing. Amazing stuff. But we learned a lot just by hashing it out. And that's also a good lesson for a team. A good team should have different perspectives. Now, Norm, he prepares better than anybody on the planet. Greg has great common sense, and he's a great seat-of-the-pants driver. Me, I'm a technical guy. Those are very different perspectives to come into it, but it worked really well for that team because we always had different angles to look at things. And that's, I think, teams that have everybody agrees don't really do anything. But the teams that really disagree or have different perspectives, those guys really do well.
Yeah, respect each other and
yeah.
Why don't we talk about your path to, you're this boat guy, you're into racing, you're having a great time racing, you're learning about boats, and then you decide, I want to do something more, I want to do something different. I mean, what was your path to engineering?
Well, it was from racing, and most people think it was the opposite way, but it actually came from racing. And what happened was, Craig Millett, my friend from high school, again, ended up, his second boat was a Rogers bubble deck. Real nice boat, beautiful boat. And he had 2 seats in it, so the co-rider, Craig Peterson, couldn't make this race at Lake Casitas in Ojai. And so I was the co-rider. So we were like the second lap or third lap into the race, and there was a sweeper corner, just a 20-degree corner, and we made it, and the boat just rolled and did a barrel roll and crashed. And Craig went flying. I bounced back into the boat, and I ended up under the deck as the boat was settling down. That was 200 feet of water, so it was pretty terrifying. But I got out. I was good. I got a lot of cuts and had some stitches, and the doctor who stitched me up was really upset because he was on a golf course. He had to shut his game off, so he was not pleased with me. He made sure it hurt as much as possible. But anyway, it turned out the rudder bent, and we were dumb. We didn't know anything. We had an aluminum rudder, and that was dumb. It should have been steel. But the rudder bent, and I thought, that little thing caused that boat at 90 miles an hour to roll and crash. It intrigued me so much that I started thinking about going into engineering, and that was the direction I went in engineering. I ended up going to San Diego State, and I got a degree in aerospace engineering with an emphasis in aerodynamics, and it started right there at Lake Casitas.
Wow, seriously.
And that went on. Yeah, that's crazy. So that went on to, as far as aerospace, I worked first at General Dynamics, Tomahawk cruise missile, Atlas rocket, did a lot of wind tunnel testing. That was kind of my thing I got into. And then McDonnell Douglas, and I was not happy there. And Rockwell, who had the prime contract for the Space Shuttle, they had a job fair, and I went there, and the interview went like this. So you've done wind tunnel testing? Yeah, a lot of wind tunnel testing. Could you do it for us? Yes. When can you start? 2 weeks. How much do you want? Got it. Signed a paper. Here, sign it. Be in 2 weeks. That's about what the interview was. So I started there, and I was on every single wind tunnel test in the Space Shuttle from 1987 to the end of the program, and it was a great honor to work with amazing guys. In fact, we have a Christmas party every year, and all the guys get together, and it's fun to see all the guys. A couple of guys are into orchids now. One guy became a professor at Cal Poly Pomona. It's just great. But the job was so intense getting ready for flights that I didn't realize how good the guys were. They were smart guys, but they were good guys, and this has been fun getting together. But that's how and that was kind of my whole career in aerospace.
And did you, throughout your career in aerospace, were you still doing boat stuff?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. That never ended. Yeah, I could only work on the weekends, and I didn't make all the races because I had wind tunnel tests to run. But, that never ended. It never ended. In fact, that was kind of funny. It was good news, bad news. When I was going to school, and I was early 20s, but it was like, shut up, kid. We don't want to hear what you have to say. But the day I graduated, everything I said was true in their eyes. And that's dangerous because you can get guys in big trouble. So I had to learn to make sure you listen to everything they're saying and not saying before you say anything, because they're going to accept what you say as gospel, even if it's not. So, but yes, racing, all the keels went on through all that period of time, never ended, never stopped. It was fun. It was just interesting because racing is, you have to make big decisions and stick by them. So responsibility is really high in racing, and not a lot of meetings. In aerospace, especially NASA stuff, it's all about the presentation. You have to stand in front of somebody, a group of people, and convince them of your argument. And I remember one time I had 6 hours on stage getting yelled at by these guys on this very controversial subject, which they agreed to everything I said the next day, which is shocking because it was not fun. But in that world, it's about a bunch of people saying, yeah, that's a good idea. In racing, very often, you're the guy who makes the decision. You're either the motor guy or the hardware guy. If you screw up, it's you. You make the decision, and you're on the string for it. So it's a leadership issue, whereas racing is, or aerospace is more a group. But I'll tell you what, racing helped me in aerospace is presentation, because especially when I was working with Norm on the top alcohol dragsters, I was always the tour guide. They would have, like the Oakwood Homes team was a very famous team, and people who sold a lot of those homes, their one of the bonuses was they get to be part of the team. And so they'd show up and they'd get a jacket and they outfit and all that stuff. And so they would come into the race trailer and I'd show them, here's what we were doing, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to see what happens. And I either look like a complete idiot or a genius, depending on how the car ran. But that really helped in aerospace, because when you're presenting, especially as you go higher and higher levels, when you're speaking to all aerodynamics guys, it's one thing. But when you're speaking at the really high levels, they don't want to hear every little detail of specific aerodynamic terms. They want to hear generic stuff. This means this. This is like this. And doing that for Norm really helped me as a presenter. I got really good at it. I'm not a great speaker. I'm not a public speaker, but making the charts and being able to make sure that the guys, the big shots, the really high level guys, understand what I'm trying to say. So it helped a lot. It went both ways.
I work with a lot of engineers right now, and I don't know how to say this. I mean, there's a way to dumb it down without sounding like you're dumbing it down,
Right.
Really make people understand it. And some people can do it. Some people just flat out can't do it. So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And it's really, it's a big deal on big teams too. When you're on a top fuel team, to be explained to other people that, often the owners are not technical guys, but you have to say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing. Does it make sense? Okay, it does, or it doesn't, whatever. But
so when you were doing aerospace stuff, how many times did you have aha moments where you're doing a wind tunnel test or something? You're like, whoa, wait a minute. That's like, I can do that on the jet boat, or I've seen this before. Like I guess could have gone either way. When
we started going into computers, that was about, I'm thinking 92 or something, 1992. I'd been in aerospace and done wind tunnel testing for years, and in the shuttle especially, we had the model, it's called 47 OTS. That means the launch vehicle, and we had 2,000 pressure taps on that vehicle. And when I say we had 20 or something on a top fuel, it goes, wow, that's a lot of data. No, that's nothing compared. So you had to check every port by hand. Some guy had a pressure thing he would put on each port, and I had to look at the computer. Yeah, it's working. Check. And you had to do that. It took like 2 days to go through that stuff. Wow. So seeing the models come together and then getting the information, how do you look at data? That's a whole world all by itself, just looking at data. And I learned so much from the guys I worked with. Some of the real stars in that business this is how you take data and make it interesting. This is how data and make you can look at it and
usable,
understand what it's saying. Usable, yeah, good term. And most guys in racing have no clue. They have no clue. Very often I'm on a team, I say, would you mind if I change things a little bit? And I'll change everything. And because it makes it more readable, you can see things. Just seeing things is really a big deal. And so aerospace, going to racing from a computer standpoint, racing was like Stone Age compared to what we were doing in wind tunnel testing. And there was the complexity of the models, complexity of the system. I mean, when we finished testing, I asked, the last test we ran was at AEDC, which is Arnold Air Force Base in Tullahoma, Tennessee. Best wind tunnel in the world, in my opinion. There's a whole bunch of tests there, tunnels there. I said, how much does it cost for a test these days? And he said, well, we will talk to you if you have $1 million to start. That's the starting discussion. So when that computer race pack made was $15,000 in 1992, the most exotic one they'd ever made. That's an expensive computer by today's standards, but it's nothing compared to nothing compared. So I was pretty comfortable when we got the data, but I didn't know what to expect either. I wanted to map the whole interior of the pump, which I did, and the keel pressure was just kind of a, hey, let's see what happens. And a lot of times you do stuff, it doesn't really do anything. That was one that was a big deal. That turned out to be a huge, huge deal. And it's one of the, in fact, other than RPM, when I look at that, keel's the first one I look at. Of the pressures, it's the number one keel. If that keel looks good, then everything else is interesting. If the keel looks bad, I don't care what everything else says, because we got to fix the keel problem before everything else goes. So yeah, aerospace really helped going to this business. But you're still into specific to the boat. The boat has its own set of problems, and you have a time limit too. And in fact, I have lunch once a year with my friends that Lena and Oman Carvajal. He is in charge of testing for Boeing rockets. So that rocket that went around the moon, came back and splashed down, he's in charge of that test. He's that guy.
Wow.
His wife is a big shot in the space station program. So we were having lunch at one of these Christmas time luncheons, and Lena said, tell me what you actually do in racing. And I explained, here's what we do between races, here's what we do between rounds. And she looked at me and said, that is real engineering. I could never do that. Now, these guys are top people in the rocket business, and they just, wow, that's a lot. Because the time limit it's not like you have, hey, give me an answer. We'll have a meeting, and we'll have a peer review, and we'll talk about it in 3 weeks from now. No, you got 15 minutes. Make a call. That's it. Go.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, it's a 5-minute chess move or 2-minute chess move or whatever it is. Yeah,
it's really tough, and when you're dealing with these extreme boats, boy, those are tough calls.
It was interesting when you first talked about, you were like on call in an SDBA race, and you're on call a weekend, so that's kind of interesting. So they just put you on call, and you're like,
yep,
yeah,
all the time. Yeah, all the time. We talk. In fact, those are really fun. I really like the SDBA guys. I don't know. I have a kind of a special place in my heart for the Southern Drag Boat Association guys. They're just they treat me well, and that's rare I'm from California, and most guys back there do not want to deal with anybody from California. That's a big minus, but they're really nice to me, and they're good racers. I'll tell you what about the SDBA guys, because they run in such bad air, they have to make great horsepower. Those guys make really good horsepower, because out here, density altitude, if it's 3,000, that's a bad day. They start at 3,000 and go to 6,000. So it's very difficult to go fast in SDBA because of that.
I know the keel thing. In fact, I think, isn't it pretty much standard if anybody buys a Daytona or gets a hold of a Daytona and they want to go fast, they ship it to you and they get the keel done, right? Through the years, I mean, I know Eliminator's really not doing many of those now, but through the years, I mean, did they ever change anything, or are they just like, this is the way it is? And
well, Bob Leach approached me at one point about doing a keel on one of his boats, but I was at Liberty at the time, and I said it's a conflict of interest. I can't do that. But I recommended match the Berkeley 4-degree intake, because it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all keel design. And so it makes it easy for me to add a keel on from that.
Gotcha.
Rather than so that's why I did it. But now things are changing a little bit. I did for Jake Gonzalez. He's making the Outlaw, and the new Cheyenne. He wanted to put one of my keels on, so I did that, and I made a deal with him, and so I put the keel on, and it comes out of the mold with the keel. So
okay. I was going to ask you about that.
That helps me because there's only so many I can do, and it's physically more difficult than it used to be too. I'm not a kid anymore, so. But yeah, I all those. The Finnegans, Mike Finnegan, 21. I did that at Eliminator Boats. That's a different keel, but that boat's working out pretty well. I actually think the 21 is going to be a really good seller, because today the power is so high that people are running.
Yeah.
You mentioned if you 1,000 horsepower. Now it's like you can go to anywhere and have a 1,500, 1,800 horsepower built. So you're talking a 130 mile an hour boat, and that's tricky on a 19. That's a dangerous boat to run on the river, but guys do.
Yeah, right. No, you're right. I mean, you might as well. I mean, the reason for going to a smaller boat was just to get it to go faster. Now you can go just as fast as you want with a big boat. Yeah, you might as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah.
Talk about, again, I don't want to keep going back to the average guy, but I know I've got some of the average guys here to listen. So we hear the term, hooks, rocker. Explain kind of the difference on that, and at what point does it make sense for a guy to go out there and figure out if he's got a hook or if he's got a rocker?
Okay, how do you define a hook? A hook is if you put a straight edge from the transom forward and parallel to the center line of the boat or the strakes. You don't want to see air underneath the straight edge. So typically speaking, and a lot of jet boats are really hooked, and a hook is like cavitation plates on a flat bottom, where they twist them down, they torque them down, and the purpose of that is to keep the boat from flying up, so they can control it out of the gate, and then they fine tune it down the track. A hook makes the boat run flatter, and you don't want that. You want to be able to set the ride with the nozzle angle or plate angle. So a hook, it makes it slow. V-bottom, gull wing, that's bad. You do not want a hook in the boat. And it's easy to fix. It's not a real complicated thing to fix. But the other side of it is a rocker. And actually the rocker is really dangerous in a tunnel because it wants to just continue to climb and it'll just blow the boat over. So you don't want a rocker there. And a V-bottom, I'm trying to think I don't think anybody runs a rocker. It's a flat bottom thing. The flat bottoms run a rocker. They want to get the boat riding on the back end of the boat and works fine for their application, but not. So the rocker would be the opposite. If you put that straight edge on, it's going to touch 1.5 feet or so from the transom, and you can just it's not touching anywhere else. That's bad. But I think often you're going to find more often than not you're going to find a hook, and the reason there's a hook, especially around the jet drive, is when they put the intake in. If they don't let it dry overnight and tighten the bolts down, they don't have to be that tight. It'll warp the bottom of the boat and put a hook right. It'll build it even if it doesn't have. So it's really important. What the guys who know what they're doing will glue it in and let it sit overnight and then put the bolts in the next day. That's a way an intake should, in my opinion. Or you just finger tight it and then you tighten down the next day. That if you're really good at that, I know guys that are riggers can do that. But you got to really be good because it doesn't take much force to warp the bottom of the boat, and then you kill the boat, hurts the boat. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question. I don't know if I
that's good. And I will mention too. I know you sent me a document for this that
right.
You're actually working on some stuff for like an ebook or something to put out there to kind of show guys how to fix that, how to fill in, how to do some keel mods on a V bottom, and so look for that.
Yeah, I think, and I wrote that mainly because I don't really do the V bottoms anymore, gull wings anymore, and I really like tunnels. The tunnel modification is really interesting to me. The V bottom work is important. I'm not saying it's not, but it's more body work than it is design, and that it's just a different kind of mindset. And also one note, especially in gull wings, putting a keel on a gull wing, and there's some guys that do that and they've had really good success. The problem, in my opinion, why I will not do it is because the boats can go so fast that you exceed the limits of the boat, and that means that if you have 1,000 horsepower or more, you can run 140 plus miles an hour with a gull wing. If you kick the rods out of it, it is a crash. It will not. A tunnel can survive that, but a gull wing will not. And I think anybody who does that is really playing with fire. So really? I don't do that. I know other guys say the same thing. They're kind of at the same point.
Got it. What about, I don't even know if they even sell, well, I think they sell something, but like graphite paint or a speed coat now.
Yeah,
is that worth the average guy?
Coat. No, it's a nice finish. And I really think the shape of the bottom, here's my priority list. What's most important is the shape, and that means a straight bottom, a good keel, those kind of things. The texture is the next most important thing, and the third thing is the finish. I think the finish actually isn't very important. I put on speed coat because people like it. It's an easy finish to put on, and you can repair it real easily. But the texture is more interesting. The texture, if you're in an area that's a non-running surface, like the upper part of the tunnel, maybe the vertical part of the tunnel, or outboard of where you're going to ride, fine. That's great. It breaks off water, and that can help you with quickness. In fact, I've done that on hydros before. I did a few hydros where I drilled dimples into the bottom of the boat, because in a hydro, you've got this giant flat surface. If anybody who's surfed knows pulling a surfboard straight out of the water is really tough. If you twist it, it comes out pretty easily. But so I did that, and it was shocking, the results, because the first thing we noticed is in that the prior system of starting wasn't a countdown clock and you just hit it and go. It was you jockeyed for position. And so you'd come up and you wanted to be the slow guy, and then you'd pass the guy, and all kinds of games played. Well, the first thing that happened, the boat speed idled so fast that the guys couldn't do that, so they had to change the the blower. They had to change some things to get the boat to slow down. And the other thing that was shocking, it did pick the tail up quickly. It did. In fact, it was. I think it was Shoemaker. He was driving the Showtime USA blown gas boat. His wife, Marcia, said, "How come you're using 2 parachutes instead of 1?" And because the boat didn't slow down, it just kept going. It just glid. So I finally got to the point with hydros. When I do a hydro, I sand the whole center section of the boat. For that reason, I want to break the water off, and I've done that on surfboards, by the way, and windsurf boards, and it really makes the board much livelier. And if you see pro surfers, they'll tell you it's for weight, but it really helps the flow on a surfboard. It makes the board much livelier. So you never see a surfer with a shiny bottom. All those boards are sanded finishes, every one of them. And
what kind of grit?
Well, on I'm not sure what they use on surfboards. I think I probably used about a 220 on a tunnel boat or a hydro. I would hit it with something like 80, and then hit it with 220. So you leave the grooves, but you have a smooth surface on top. But there was a test. A 3M had a product, and it was Dennis Connors in the America's Cup sailboat race. And they had 2 identical boats. One, they had this 3M material covered with grooves, tiny little grooves in it. Same kind of thing, same idea. And they had 2 boats, and they raced 10 times head-to-head. The one with the grooves won 10 out of 10. So they came to the conclusion, guess what? The water, it gets into boundary layer theory and all that, and you can calculate boundary layer theory. I get into that a lot in stand-up paddling. But the boundary layer at slow speeds is really thick, and as you go, it turbulates and it changes. But I think texture is very important. You can make it pretty rough, as long as it's not in the running area. If you like the center sponson area, the keel, certainly not the keel. The keel, I want the water to follow. I do not want it to break off. Gotcha. So do not touch that area. Just make that as smooth as possible.
Interesting.
And finish it whatever works. Speed coat I like because it's easy. But I used to finish them with epoxies or I'm not a great painter, so speed coat's easy. Even a guy like me can paint it and make it look pretty good. So it's nice, and you can get spray cans of that if you want to.
Because the stuff I used to sell 100 years ago, I don't think they make it. Was it like Everlube or something before?
Yeah, Everlube, they still make it. That was.
Do they still make it? Okay.
Yeah, they were using it for rockets and something like that, but you can still get it. I think I get it from a company it's an aviation company out of New York, because Eddie Marine used to sell it. They don't anymore. Rex Marine used to sell it. They don't sell it anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that's where I get it. I can't remember.
Okay, cool.
Sky Geeks something, I think it is, out of New York.
Okay, cool. Great tips.
On that finish, what I do, by the way, is before, and I mentioned that in an article, but I when I get the shape all done, I fill all the pinholes. I shoot it with a polyester primer, and that you can shoot it really thick, and it's a good base. And you get it. I sand it down to 400, 220, 400, and then I shoot the speed coat on there. So that's good for any V-bottom. They could do that, no problem.
Awesome. Oh, good stuff, man. Somebody asked me, what about how bad are like water pickups?
Are you talking intakes for jet drives?
No, if you want to put a pickup for like an oil cooler or something, you're just going to force feed, like a force feed pickup. It'd be a water pickup on a V drive. Yeah,
that you can lose some speed depending on where it is. We run water pickups off the fin of the intake for speed, and it's about an 1/8 inch tube, and we haven't seen any speed difference or no torquing difference when it goes down the track. If you stick a big enough hole there in the water, it's going to slow you down, and if it's way off center line, it's going to pull you too. If you can pick it up off the jet drive, that's a good place to go. I know that's always a battle. I'm not going to get into the details, but I know Finnegan on his 21 is struggling with water, too much, not enough, depending on where it's going, and so that's a battle for him right now. And I'm sure he'll have a YouTube video on how they solve it. That'll be good.
Well, that's interesting, because I was watching his thing, and man, he was feeding a lot of stuff off that jet pump. the intercooler and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, no, it's interesting.
Cool.
He does great videos, and he's it's funny. He's now famous, and he's done all these great things, and the kids have never seen him before. They're like, wow, I partied with Mike Finnegan, and all the guys who knew him for years ago. That goofball, he's a goofball. But he's done great things for drag boat racing, especially jets. We're really happy to have him back, and he's just a great influence on the sport. It's been great.
That's what I like about it. It's just introduced a whole new crowd of people to even just your average jet boat guy. People are realizing how fun they are. Or that's stuff we've known forever, right? He actually told me to ask you about the golf ball dimples in the hydro.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I did that. I think I don't know if I had actually calculated. I calculated. I think I had 3,623 golf ball dimples, and it took me all day. It is I used a pegboard's got the holes, and I twisted it a little bit, so in 2 inches, every square inch of that hole has air on it, and I just all day long. I was like, do not do that. That's crazy.
Yeah. All in the name of science, right, Jeff?
Yeah. You try things, and that worked out pretty well. It's too much of a hassle, but there's so many things we do that don't work out, and that's okay. We eliminated some, just like Edison with the light bulb. He found 1,000 ways it didn't work before he found the one that did work.
Correct. Right.
That's part of the sport. You make up. In fact, there's something I did want to say on testing, is guys make a big mistake. So many people come up with good ideas, and they go out and test it, and it doesn't work. And they say, it was a bad idea. What usually happens is they solved the problem they wanted to solve, they did what they wanted to do, but they created 3 new problems. And the guys who are really good, and I mean, you can name any one of these top racers, they all do the same thing, is if we solve those 3 problems, and every single time we get those 3 problems solved, that's a record. That's the next
Interesting.
record.
That's a great way to look at it.
For a do-it-yourself guys, make sure you do that. Don't give up so easily. Think about why, and that's another tip, is why something works is more important than what actually works. If you understand the why, the what, and I mean the angles, the locations, the settings, all that stuff. If you understand why something works, it's pretty easy to figure out. It's not that complicated, but it really is complicated if you have no idea how it works. So that's a challenge, and that's hard to do. That takes a long time. That's not easy to do. Not everybody's going to get that.
Yeah. Well, I think you just said that's another thing too, right? I mean, any testing, to do it right, it takes a long time. You've got to be patient. You do. I had a real advantage in testing as a kid. My dad was an inventor, and he once invented this computer car, and this was before PCs. He had to build a computer. That means solder transistors, capacitors, resistors. He had this big monumental thing. Got a Ford Falcon. He had this drive run, and it was made for farming. You could program it. It would drive a course, and we were over at Cal State Fullerton driving this thing, and I was like 12 years old, but I learned so much about testing. So when years later I got into wind tunnel testing, it was like, guys, I've done this. I'm a pro at this, even though I'm the first day on the job. I got it. This is easy. And it was, because my dad, I'm sure I drove him out of his mind, but I loved it. It was great. It was great practice. But it's, selling boat parts for as long as nothing we ever did was really high tech, because we never really had good R&D. But man, just trying to get guys to just the simplest tests, like, no, you don't do that until you do, and no, you don't change 4 things. Like,
that's a big deal right there. Man, yes.
It's amazing how many guys get impatient and change, and
and they miss. Sometimes they'll run good in the morning and then they run badly in the afternoon, and they didn't take into consideration the air went away, so their horsepower went down. And the guys who know, they keep track of density, altitude, or other things, but they know you're not going to do as well in the afternoon unless there's something else they fixed. But testing is. Man, that's a whole podcast on testing. There is so much there, and the guys who are great, the guys like Joey Gross and David Kirkland, and those guys, they got it. They understand how it works, but most people don't. Shell Adams is very good at testing.
Great stuff, man. So you've had a ton of great successes, right? Like, you met a lot of good people, and without naming names, I mean, tell me like a really horrible team situation race weekend that you got into that you'll never kind of forget, and tell us how that went and how you got out of it.
There was one team, a very famous Top Fuel hydro team, and they did well later, but we made a first qualifying pass and they didn't have enough parts to put it back together. They had to borrow somebody else's part, and I remember Norm was there. I'd been with Norm. Grimes is so polished, so ready to go. I remember being in a drag race, the car, and somebody, hey Norm, do you have a whatever the part was? Yes. There's 6 shelves in this 18-wheeler. Okay, the third cabinet from the back, open it up, and in the second drawer in the far right, there's this part, and there's 3 of them. Now, when you take that, write it on your board that you took this part. And you got to be kidding! I forget what I had for dinner yesterday. That's where he was. Now, these guys were the opposite. And Norm showed up, and I told him the story, and he says, it's scary, isn't it? When you're used to racing with good teams, you expect that level, especially Top Fuel. And, yeah, that was...
Yeah, that's not something you can do on a shoestring. Yeah.
Situation. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. But there are other funny stories too. I mean, there's all that. But let's see. I'm trying to think of bad situations. That's. I'm sure I have a bunch of them. I haven't really focused on that because I try to get out of those as soon as possible. You get people. I think one of the difficulties I've had over the years is you have an owner that's a very successful businessman. And he says, I know how to do this because I've been successful here. And they have no clue how to race. And they think they do. So you go down these rat holes of stupid ideas. That's really bad. And so I think for me, probably one of the skills I've had to learn over the years is sizing up a team. Is this team got it? Can this team be a good team? And I mentioned Jason Fandre earlier in the conversation from Wisconsin. This is his first full season. That guy, he's great. Is his first boat he's ever put together that I know of. He did everything right. He talked to the right people, and it gets down to people and parts. You get the right people, you'll get the right parts, you'll be successful. He did everything right. And he's a guy I can look at and say, that guy at any level if he wants to run Top Fuel, he'll be great at it. Yeah. I know it right now. Other guys you're around, you just go, nah. Or guys that just want to party all the time. Racing is hard work. It's hard. If you want to win, you can have fun. There's nothing wrong with the end of the day having some beers and even get wasted, but you've got to, during the race and during qualifying, you've really got to be focused. And guys, Another one on that, just in general, the guys that they qualify 16th, and after a few beers, they're convinced they're going to set a world record and win the race tomorrow. You know, if the guys who win races all the time sometimes do qualify 16, they know how to get back to number 1. But the guys who are always a 16, there's no chance in hell those guys are going to win. But they talk themselves into it. It's called wishing and believing racing. That is not a good strategy. So when you're around guys like that, I don't want to be around. At this point, I guess I'm old enough and crotchety enough, I just want to race with good racers. When you're racing with good racers, it's like Christmas Day. When you're racing with terrible racers, it's a disaster. You want to kill yourself. It's not worth it. It's too much work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're so valuable and your time's so precious. Like, don't have time to be spinning your wheels. But it's interesting. I didn't think about this when you were telling me before. I think Jason, he's the guy you said doesn't have a data logger, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, what did you see in him that allowed you to give that guy a chance? Because here's a guy that doesn't have all the best of the stuff, and
right. He had called me and asked me to fly out to Wisconsin and work on his boat. And just being around him and his dad, I was just impressed. They'd done some hot rods, they'd worked on stuff, but I was just impressed with how his mind worked. He was very methodical. He step by step. He's slow. It took him a long time to get this boat together, but he asked the right questions. He got the right people involved. I think that is huge, to get the right people involved. And I think, just a side note, a lot of people, new guys, want to say, I'm going to talk to everybody and take an average of the ideas. Do not do that. Because the good guys will not waste their time with you. You're dealing with guys that are great and guys that are lousy, and you're saying, well, somewhere in between. No, you got to get the great guy, and that's it. But he he has the approach. If he can't afford it, he'll save up for it, but he won't skimp. And he got a great pop off. He got the right intake. He got a good boat. He got a used boat. I don't know how to put it any differently other than he just got it. He's just an excellent boat guy, and it's fun. I think he's got one more race, and I believe he's going to win the championship in the Upper Midwest Powerboat Association, which I have no experience in, but he's great. I really like him. He's special, and I see that in him. I see greatness in him right now.
It's very cool. Well, it's cool that you had the foresight to look past the guy and give him a chance, and obviously, I mean, what you just said, you kind of went down a checklist of what you're looking for, so you can see that. So very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna, man, I appreciate this, and I told you before we started and after I was reading your bio and stuff. No, I don't want to burn you out, and I also want to, man. There's so much. Like I want to, we definitely need to do this again, and we'll regroup.
I'd love to
and do it again. But there's always a question I like to ask guys, and you had a really good answer. And I want people to obviously, man, from the aeronautics and the engineering and the boat stuff, like you've done a lot, and you've told us a lot about yourself. But tell us something that people would be really surprised to hear that you do or you like or you're a talent you have, and people want to ask you more about it.
Okay, I don't know if they want to ask me more about it, but I'm a trumpet player. I played in a lot of groups. I played in the Pacific Symphony Orchestra. I've just signed on to Calvary Chapel Chino Hills Orchestra. We start our rehearsals next week, and I think what's interesting is people will often ask, how can you be a technical guy and a musician? And one time I've really recently, in recent years, got into composition, and I love film scoring. That's my favorite kind of music.
Oh,
and I happened to go to a seminar one time, and I happened to sit next to a guy that was a professional film composer, and he told me, he said, if I wasn't a film composer, I'd be an aerospace engineer. I love what you guys do. It's fine. And I told him, if I was an aerospace engineer, I'd like to be a film composer. And that guy now, he does A-list movies. He's a big guy. Joe Trapanese, he does very big movies. And we still stay in touch. I still say hi to him. But I think that technical and creativity are two sides of the same coin. I really don't. I think, especially film composers, a lot of film composers are aviation guys. They fly airplanes, and that's not uncommon, real uncommon. So that they might be surprised. I don't know if they're interested in that, but I think there's something very special about playing in a group. And I played in a lot of groups. I used to play professionally. I played in a rock group. Actually, we're going to get together this weekend. We haven't been together for 15 years, but we have some of the guys that the drummer played for Robert Plant, I think it was, and the keyboard player tours with Chris Isaac today. And so I got to see one of their shows, and I met Chris, met the whole team and the whole band, and Chris said, next time bring your horn, we can play a set with you. I'd love that. That would be really fun. I don't know if he was kidding, I don't whatever, but it would be fun to play with that. But so it's fun. I think it's something very special to make music with a group of people. It's really, really special. Really special.
I love music, and I've never learned to play anything. I just think musicians, I think it's a really special talent. I think people that are musicians, especially if you compose, I think you're really smart people.
I'm terrible at composing, by the way, but I'm working. My teacher is a film composer, and he hasn't kicked me out the door yet, so that's a good sign. But studying harmony, and there's a lot to it, and especially film, to get emotion across without lyrics is, to me, amazing. I'm a big fan of those guys. I think they're incredible.
Wow, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. Thank you so much for all the stuff you shared, and
all right.
I hope I didn't pepper you too much with the average guy stuff, but man, there's a lot of guys that eat that stuff up. So
more than happy. The fact is, I don't often get that, because at the races, I often hide in race trailers, because I get people to think I'm the greatest person in the world or the biggest idiot in history. So I just hide in the race trailer, and so I don't talk to a lot of people anymore, and I don't get a lot of those questions. But those are really important questions to ask. They really are, because most people are that level. They're not racing for a record.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you going on. I'm glad to be connected, and we are definitely going to do this again. We'll back and regroup, and people can find you've got a website, BennettAnalytics.com, correct?
Yeah, that's
correct?
More geared to the aerospace stuff, but I'll probably add more race stuff to it because it's interesting. It's interesting stuff. But that website is more geared to the aerospace work that I still do. I still do sometime.
Okay. You do some social media too, right? Aren't you on Instagram?
Instagram. I do have a Facebook account. It disappeared a year ago, and I got another one, and it's coming back. People go, "Where have you been?" I don't know what. One day it just didn't work. I don't know what happened. They didn't like me or whatever. I don't know what happened, but.
All right. Well, cool. I just like to let people know where to watch you, and again, like I said, I follow you on social media, and I like how after a weekend you're on there talking about who did what and how well your guys did. So that's cool. Cool.
Well, I'm really proud of them because it takes, whether I'm involved or not, there's a lot of work. You win a race in this day and age, boy, you've got to be a very hard-working, talented person to pull off a race. It's not easy to do. It's really hard.
Or you get the best people behind you, like a Jeff Bennett.
Boy, they're good segue. No,
all right.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, I'll let you go. I kept you a lot longer than I said I would, but sorry, It was really good. I couldn't resist.
No, it's fun. It was really fun. Let's do it again.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Take care.
Okay, all right. We'll see you now. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Powerboat Talk. If you like what you've heard, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more Powerboat Talk, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website at powerboattalk.com.